Hello everybody, day 6 of shelter. I wonder how you're all doing today. I'm curious as to what emotions you're feeling and the range of them, the intensity of where they take you to, and of course the behaviors and patterns that follow. So I've had a lot of good deep conversations with a lot of people over the last couple of days, and I felt the most appropriate word or subject choice for today would be understanding others. We're all in real close proximity to one another. For many of us, we're boxed up in homes together, in close quarters, and there are a lot of relationships that are being put under strain. We could get out of the household, into our offices, and now we're needing to actually work with areas that are starting to stand up for us, whatever that might be for us. So if we look at understanding others, Josh Friedman, who's the CEO of 6 Seconds, once said, if you want to understand others, you need to get beneath the surface and start understanding emotions. If you fool yourself into believing the surface story, you're missing invaluable data. So it's really interesting. I had a client that I had a check-in with this morning, and the first thing she said to me when she stepped into that place, she was a few minutes late, and she said, what did she say? She used the word, I'm useless. And I listened for a few moments, and I listened to what followed after that, and she immediately went into blaming and trying to get rid of the discomfort she was feeling in that space with me, knowing that she let herself down. It had to do around time and all of those things. The purpose was what happens when we feel something that we feel really uncomfortable with. Where do we go? What are our patterns that we step into? And how helpful are they? Now, we only know what's going on for us when we really stop long enough to reflect, understand by naming the emotion and seeing what it is that's actually driving that emotion. What is the data that's being sent to us? And when we can do that work for ourselves, we can start to do that work for others. So when we talk about feelings, it can be really awkward for people. And especially when you start to talk about understanding others, if you haven't yet understood yourself, how on earth do you expect me to understand others? So yes, starting with yourself is always a great space. However, we can't always put important conversations on hold because we are still needing to integrate our own emotions and what's going on for us. However, we can go a long way into holding that space, being emotionally stable by actually understanding what's going on for us so that we can step into those places and have important conversations. Those were just my 3 hounds diving out of the office after something or other in the felt. So to get beneath the surface and start understanding emotions, I think one of the greatest factors that comes up is trust. And trust is a big area for both of us. And remember, this is a huge subject, so I'm just going to touch and skirt around the edges of it, but I'm really just throwing the subject out for you to be thinking about when you think about needing to have deep conversations with others and maybe trusting where it is or understanding where it is that they are right now. So nobody moves beyond surface conversations if there's no trust. So the first thing you want to do is, who is it that you might need to be having good, deep conversations with, and what is your level of trust with that individual? Gaining trust can be really, really difficult depending on situations and different types of people. For me, if I think about trust, there's pockets of trust. So the areas that I've been hurt in are the areas that I mistrust the most. So, typically, and in fact, a conversation that I remember having with Jonathan many, many years ago was around the area of trust. And he said to me, do you trust me? And I really had to think about that because trust is such a big subject. And I think there were areas that I didn't trust him as much as I'd like to have. And there were certainly areas that I trusted him implicitly. I mean, I used to go rock climbing with him. Of course I trusted him. I trusted him with my life. That's real trust. So there's pockets, and a good key for you is to know the areas that you've been hurt are the areas that will probably be the areas that you would not trust as well. So it's to understand where you are around the area of trust and the individual that you're wanting to go into deeper conversation with. So you want to feel comfortable and you want to have genuine interest in the person's conversation. So that's the first thing that you want to do when you're starting to actually build trust with somebody, is to listen. Stop what you're doing, be present, and actually give them your time of day so that they know that you care. And that's showing genuine interest and making the other person feel comfortable immediately, secure and welcomed. Be careful that when you listen, that you're not trying to dive into the conversation and take over the conversation. Because remember, a lot of the time when we're not listening, we're actually already formulating our own responses. And that's got a lot to do with us, being right or not being comfortable with the level of the conversation, just trying to blame or shame or just move out of it so that we actually end up sabotaging ourselves through the process anyway. So there's a lot to be thinking about in this area of trust in terms of what stands up for you. And in fact, it's probably a good time when I think about trust, I think about Brene Brown's acronym that she uses for trust, for building trust, and it's called braving. And how brave do we need to be when we need to move into more trusting relationships and understanding ourselves more and others. So if we look at the first one, B is for boundaries, and we know that we need to respect our own boundaries. We need to know what our boundaries are, where our limits end, what we want, what we don't want, what we're letting in, what we're not. And that's got everything to do with you knowing who you are. So practice boundaries, because otherwise, if you're inconsistent around your boundaries, one day you do this, the next day you do the next, you can't really be trusted around what tomorrow holds in that very arena, because yesterday it was different to today. So that's not really comforting for the person that's trying to trust you and believing in what your next move might be for them. Then we look at reliability, and reliability has got everything to do with consistency. Consistency is your word being your word. If you say you're going to do something, then make sure that you follow through with that. Now, just a personal story on this. Many years ago, my language let me down, actually. I used to say to John T, I'm just popping down to see a friend. Now, popping down, correctly so, is a few minutes. Popping is a few words, a few minutes. And I used to be gone for 2 to 3 hours having coffee with one of my besties. And I'd get back and John would be really uptight and upset with me, and I couldn't understand why. It was because I was unreliable. I was not consistent. I wasn't clear. So reliability is a huge aspect, and where does that show up for you? And then being accountable, owning your own mistakes, apologizing and making amends when you know that you've stepped out of line, or where you've really caused an issue, or whether you're just being difficult in a situation. Then there's the vault, which is our areas of confidentiality, to be careful of what we share and what we don't. And remember that there's a back door to your vault as well. Remember, if you're talking about me, I'm wondering who it is that you're talking to others about me. So there's a huge area there where we build trust for ourselves and others. And then integrity. Integrity is one of my greatest values, and integrity for me is really all of me coming together, looking at my thoughts, my feelings, and how my actions come into alignment with that. And for me, that's being in alignment with myself, my own integrity. And when you're out of integrity with yourself. When you've stepped in and you've made droog in a situation where you haven't responded appropriately and you've caused a scene. And so I love Brené's use of words. She says, you choose courage over comfort. You choose what is right over what is fun, fast, or easy. and you choose to practice your values rather than simply professing them. And that's where we start to get into important conversations around your values, values that light the way, leading with your values. It's got everything to do with who you are and how you're showing up in this world. And then, of course, non-judgment, making sure that you are watching your judgment calls on individuals. Ask for what you need, and talk about how you feel without the judgment, because so often we're so uncomfortable with our feelings that we tend to move into blaming or shaming spaces. And trust me, I've walked into this space many times in my life, and it's created enormous havoc for me. And then the last one being generosity. And generosity can certainly be around finances, but when we talk about trust, it's got nothing to do with that. It's got everything to do with believing the best in the other person. And if you believed those people that you loved or that you love are doing the very best that they can, how might that change the way that you show up with them? So that's something to really take into consideration when you're building trust, is the braving part of who you are and how integrated you are with yourself. Because remember, trust starts with us, and then it can only be offered to others. So as you move into those conversations, to remember to be curious, to listen to what the other person is saying, what it is that they're feeling. And when you go into these spaces, time is a very, very important aspect of a good, deep, meaningful conversation. And it's something that we use in a coaching space. It's actually a tool that I have that I give to my clients. And it's really about creating a space. I'm looking at the time and I'm seeing 11 minutes already, and I'm realizing that this video is going on a bit long. So very, very quickly, you want to create that space. And to create that space, you want to be able to set a scene. So set up an agreement with the person you're having the deep conversation with, especially if it's a difficult one, to say, I really have a need to discuss some really difficult things for myself. It's going to be vulnerable. Would you mind if I finish speaking before you respond? Because then you're setting up a safe space for yourself, and it's also safe for the other person, because very often we talk and somebody dives in and actually takes away the conversation, and you never really get the opportunity to share what's really on your mind. So choose the time, set up that safe space, and have those important conversations. And if any of you are really interested in the actual full outlay of what a difficult conversation looks like, please do be in touch with me. I've got beautiful layouts and templates and things that can create lovely space for you to to have those deep conversations. And then the last one is focus. And the focus is to be present in the moment with that person. So you're giving them your 100% attention. Don't have your phone in your hand, or be busy cooking or dealing with a child or something like that. Find a space where you can be present, look each other in the eye, and have these beautiful, deep conversations so that we can learn to understand each other better. So the first question I want to ask is, what relationship would benefit you from going a little bit deeper? And if you could focus on building trust, setting aside time, and keeping focus in your relationships, what would be different for you? Gosh, this is really a word for me today on so many levels. And how would that directly impact you and the other person? And then finally, out of the three areas that we've spoken about today, trust, time, and focus, which is the one that you need to engage with more to be able to allow and increase deeper understanding for yourself and others? Thank you for listening. I'll see you tomorrow.